Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here. I was just stuck staring out the window that I have right here in front of me when I do these recordings because today is a surprise snow day here in north central PA, and I'm sure a lot of places on the East Coast right now, the Midwest, surprise snow day. Maybe not for everybody, but for here it is, and certainly for me personally because boss closed the office today, so I get a day off of school. Doesn't mean I'm not working though, right? It's just I get to do this instead. So it's another important, it feels like a little bit of an extension of the Thanksgiving holiday, which was also my solar return. Thursday, the 27th, is my solar return, and it just happened to be Thanksgiving this year. So it was actually a really, really good birthday and weekend up at Seneca Lake, or the Finger Lakes, as they're known, Seneca Lake being one of them. And it just feels like having a surprise snow day. Even though I went into the office yesterday, surprise snow day feels like an extension of the Thanksgiving holiday, which is really nice, actually, and gives me the chance to kind of stretch my legs a little bit, not have to cram this transmission into, an hour and a half and wonder if it's actually making any sense. Not that this will either, but at least I have the capacity to really focus here right now instead of trying to cram it all into one chunk of time before I move on to the next thing. So, surprise snow day, and as I said, it's another important holiday season here in north central Pennsylvania, and that's the beginning of buck season. So, my dad, it is like first of all, if you're from here or anywhere around this area, then you know. and I'm sure it's like this other places too, but it's definitely the season. I mean, you get Monday off from public school in this area if for deer season. So Thanksgiving was my dad's favorite holiday because it was the beginning of deer season. And I'm actually wearing one of his flannels today because I know that it's snowing like this. And anybody that maybe wanted an extra day to hunt and didn't want to go back to work, man, today would be the day because snow is no thing if you're really serious about going out deer hunting. So my dad did take me when I was young. I just wanted to go out with him so bad, and I got my did my hunter safety course, was actually able to shoot, a small shotgun, and he took me out for small game hunting, and deer hunting. I had a little rifle, never got a deer or saw a deer, and usually I'd make it for maybe like an hour most, and then he'd march me back down the mountain and go back out. So he loved being up. He just loved being outside, and the hunting was certainly part of it. But I think he really, just knowing how I am, I think he really just valued being out in the quiet of the woods so much. And I'm even more convinced of that now, just after seeing everything and taking stock of like his life as I knew it. I was just like, yeah, that's really what the value was. And in fact, interesting story, on July 13th, 2024, which was the day, the day of the Butler assassination incident, was July 13th. It was also the day, I believe, the sun was, or was it Mars? Gosh, I'd have to go back. There was a square, either the sun or, I don't think it was the sun, in a square, probably Mars, in a square to Uranus on that day as well. Like, yeah, pretty intense astrological configuration. That was also the day that I think my dad finally started to accept the gravity of the situation, that he was on hospice and that his time was limited, because he verbalized to me on that day. We were camping actually as a family, and there was just a moment where it was like me and him, and everybody was kind of scattered elsewhere doing other things or somewhere else, and he and I were just sitting at the campground, and he just said, I just want to go into my tree stand one more time. He's like, I don't even care if I see or shoot a deer. He's like, I just want to be up there. He had a spot in north of here and it's his best friend's cabin, and property, but, like best friends since they were 5, best friend, like a brother. So it pretty much was his house too. Um, he really, really valued that space, and it brought him a lot of peace. And we actually spread, some secret ashes that we weren't supposed to keep based on where he was buried. We took him anyway, and we put him out at his tree stand. So anyway, I didn't plan on telling that story. I was just kind of joking about buck season, but it really brought in, that date. I will never forget that date, and the fact that it was the same day of that Butler assassination attempt. It just, and the square, I'm almost positive it was a Mars in a square to Uranus. Like how impactful these transits can really be. So, which of course leads into the whole of this transmission. And there are very specific things about this full moon on its own in terms of the astrology and the aspects of the astrology that are really impactful without what I'm going to also bring in, which is the upcoming solar weather. So it's forecasted to land, around the full moon, which is on the 4th of December, right? We're doing a Gemini full moon. This is, sorry if I may not have, I totally bypassed like, hey, this is what this video is about. Full moon in Gemini on December 4th, 2025. This full moon forecast is going to go over, especially if you're new here, this is going to go over the main astrological themes for the second half of the lunar quarter, the full moon through the third quarter, into the balsamic moon phase. So the full moon is a time where our purpose is illuminated, things are illuminated, fulfilled, clarified, from the new moon. And we had a new moon in Scorpio. If you haven't listened to that video, I talk a lot about some of the general themes having to do with late Scorpio, Alpha Centauri star seeds and their traits, the Heyoka and what role that plays in a society, and how it's all linked into the intention of the new moon, and a lot of being able to make peace with the opposition or the contention or the destructive elements within each of us, right? Make peace and experience a state of, I guess you could say, intercession. And the Heyoka in a society, especially because that word is very specific to the Lakota, nation or the Lakota tribe, that role of Heyoka, the sacred clown. It's not a universal term, but it does represent, I think, a universal role in a community. That role is to take on the persona or the role of the thing that is contentious, and in that case it's in the society, right? Like drawing to light the things that we kind of shove away, we don't want to acknowledge, that bring out all kinds of feels that are intense, and the dark side of humanity. That's what a Heyoka does, and it's a healing role. And so I feel like a lot of the last new moon, the focus on the Heyoka, the focus on that magic triangle and all of the potential that exists right now, was to bring us to a place to really set some intention, for our own personal growth, around being able to find that peace within ourselves, to find that place where, we can basically alchemize or transform the difficult emotional energies, mental energies, physical stuff that's going on and everything around it, all the things that stress us out, all the things that give us lots of challenges, whatever that opposition is. Like, we have to find a way to cooperate and make peace with it. That, I think, was the biggest one. And the Alpha Centauri starseed, the role of the Heyoka, these are individuals and these are aspects of ourselves that are infinite and timeless and connected to something beyond that contention, that can basically take on the reflection of that which scares us or which frustrates us or which angers us and causes destruction. And we need to rein it back in, right? The Sabian symbol for that new moon actually was, a mother pleading to the chief of the tribe for the lives of her children, presumably because they have run off the rails. So we all have that aspect of ourselves that becomes destructive if we not take responsibility for it. So the full moon, as with all full moons, like I said, clarifies the purpose. Like everything has started to, the way we express ourselves is starting to illuminate what is going on subconsciously. And when we get to the full moon, that's where we see things clearly, we feel them strongly, we understand that, bipolarity, any axis of opposition is, the way to transform that energy is to find a way to synthesize it, to find a catalyst and synthesize it and turn it into something new, right? The art of alchemy, spiritual alchemy. So we've been working on that, and it's been I feel like there's been a lot of challenges since that new moon, that we're all bumping up against the things that, are difficult for us, or coming to terms with aspects that have been kind of running amok and causing problems. And from a spiritual perspective, it's things that have to do with what types of thought patterns are we indulging, right? Like what kind of feelings are coming up consistently in relation to certain situations, right? Where is our PTSD? There's going to be a lot of Chiron stuff in the next 2 weeks that I'll go into. So we're working with that. And the thing about this full moon, which is why I need to bring the solar energy in and what's going on with it, because it's all, like I said, it's forecasted to all converge pretty much at this full moon, is that it's part of a configuration called a grand cross, which is a grand square. It's a big square, and all of the signs are involved, and there's two exact oppositions. And in this case, the full moon will be an exact opposition of the Sag Sun, Gemini moon, both at really, especially the sun in Sagittarius, at a very powerful position. And then the nodes of the moon, which is the direction and pathway of the soul's journey, the north node being the head and the south node being the dragon, or the tail of the dragon. These are all locked into a grand cross, and so it's a mutable grand cross. So the need to be resilient and adaptable is a big part of this full moon. So we're going to go into all the specifics so we can break down where everything is, what it's related to, the starseed connections to all of it, so we can get a sense of like how we can best maximize the potential of this time period that we're not only just with the full moon, but the 2 weeks prior, because it's with the revelation of the full moon that then gives us the awareness, the responsibility, the objective perspective to apply everything that we have, that has been illuminated for us as the light of the moon wanes. And so it's when we have full illumination, solar illumination of our insides, then it's really, we can move forward with clarity. But as the light of the moon starts to wane, and how we feel and our emotional landscape is not nearly as obvious or lit up, this is where we have all these problems, because the sun is, moving along and we're expressing ourselves and finding a sense of purpose. But how we feel and our emotional landscape is really important to acknowledge too. And sometimes that can be just a big challenge. And so just normally, but this full moon is carrying so much potential, but also a really strong box that we can't get out of, right? The only way out is through. But I think our supercharge here is going to be the solar amplification through geomagnetic storms at the time of the full moon. So it might be, I could see it being a point of shorting out. But I also think that this is, if you have been working with that tension within yourself, if we have been doing it, then we'll already kind of be, I don't want to say prepared. That's not the right thing to communicate. It's more, but yeah, kind of. It won't be unfamiliar to be like, oh, another really big challenge that we all have to get through. And the thing is, for every person that consciously and with self-awareness practices the art of spiritual alchemy with everyday life, right, and has been working towards not only getting to traversing the steps up the mountain, which is what we've been doing since the beginning of the eclipse season at like a soul level, but is just ready to receive the just receive. I don't want to, it's not a, it's not a download, but kind of, it's more than that. There's, I actually heard, if you've listened to Jamie Price, I haven't listened to her monthlies in a really long time, but the Lyran energy has been really, really strong. And I'm going to go into that in the astrology too. And I also had a really specific vision. I have something, a photo I want to share too, just about the Lyran energy, and it's connected to this Grand Cross too. Just, the need to be resilient and adaptable. And that brought me to like just one day be like, I haven't listened to Jamie Price in a really long time. I'm really curious what her ascension energies are coming up. And so I was like, well, yeah, of course, she's like right on point. So the one for December, and I'll link her video for the December one somewhere in here, description box or in the comment section, if you're interested in it. But the thing that she said, and I really hate to like just kind of poach somebody else's channeled information, but I feel like it's the right word. It's just like about an anointing, right? Mission accepted, right? And that doesn't mean, and so being in a Grand Cross means like you have a mission that you've accepted. Well, your mission is to get out of this box that this is created, or has been created, as we're going to see with the astrology, whatever that challenge is in your life, what it means to accept this anointing. And anointing, you're going to have to do some work on that for yourself in terms of what that really means to you. But I really enjoyed her, the way she characterized this energy. And I do see that this full moon with this solar weather at the same time really carrying it's not a heaviness at all. Like ever since we gone into Sag season, it's been pretty great actually, in terms of, especially if you're a Sag person. It's usually, Scorpio time is usually such a challenge for, well, I would say for me, because I'm also very strongly on the feminine side, Scorpio heavy. And then I have all of this masculine energy, including my natal sun in Sagittarius. So there's always such a dramatic kind of like descent into hell, then coming out into like just a rebirth around this time. So I feel like that's the potential here for a lot of people. And of course, what I've always noticed is that people who identify as light workers or starseeds, on like some sort of spiritual path, you're of service, you're a bridge, right? Between divinity and humanity, whatever you do, right? If you're a shaman, you're a mystic, you're a healer, whatever it is. It's like we pre-wave this in terms of everyone else, because then we kind of like set the baseline pattern. And so the more of us that are doing this work within ourselves, the more it's going to translate out. It's going to be shared, and the more potential we can get out, positive potential we can get out of this particular time period and the 2 weeks following. Like I said, there's a lot of Chiron stuff that's going to be happening. There's a number of, there's just a lot of transits too, that are going to be just like consistently impacting us, right? It's just going to be like a wave after wave. And in fact, that kind of looks like what the Schumann resonance looks like. I'm going to share it with you right now. Looks like right over the last couple of days. I thought it was really strange, actually. So let me see if I can get this properly formatted. Don't mind this, every site has so many ads. So you might have to open your screen or enlarge it a little bit just to see what I'm talking about. But this is the frequency, the amplitude, and the quality of the Schumann resonance over the last couple of days. But the thing that really struck me is, and most people only just look at the main sonograph and make some stuff up usually. without knowing what they're looking at about what it is. However, when you break it down and you look at all of the wave functions based on all of these things, then you're like, okay, now I can kind of get an idea what's going on. And the thing that really struck me, number one, is that the frequency itself was very on the top level, right? The surface level, these four lines, the green and the red seem to be fairly stable and not any drastic changes. So that's actually a good sign. And you can see that here too. And even down with the quality, right? The surface level stuff is the most erratic and is like moving rapidly. But and especially the frequency, you can see that they're drastic up and down, like over the last couple of days. The amplitude hasn't been super loud, but there have been shifts. But the quality as well has shown, especially on the top, right? The top two layers here, the quality has been, hasn't been consistent. So there's clearly been a lot of up and down and back and forth and just, experiencing those, crests or those peaks and valleys pretty consistently, like energetically. And there's just going to be, I feel like that's been building over the past 2 weeks since the new moon. Now, all right, I want to share with you, so I'm going to close that out. And I just want to show, hold on, we'll get to the more esoteric stuff here. I just, I want you to be aware of the space weather. It's really important. Some people don't even think any of this exists, and that's fine. Like, I mean, I can't prove that any of this is happening other than all I can do is compare my personal experience to what the data is purportedly telling me. And a lot of times it seems to really match up with what I'm feeling and what is going on. So what I will say is that we have this okay, so geomagnetic storms are predicted, right? There was an X2 solar flare. The CME, or coronal mass ejection, might graze Earth because of it went off at an angle. And there's also this large coronal hole, right? So solar wind stream is going to come at us as well, it's going to start probably today into tomorrow, and it's going to amplify, and then we might be getting that CME at the same time. So expect solar storms, of course. The other thing, too, is that there is this very large sunspot group that, when combined, is as big as the one that caused the Carrington event in 1859. So if you're not familiar with that, I recommend that you look it up and figure out what it is so that when people reference it in reference to solar weather, sunspots, things like that, you know what the Carrington event, which is a sunspot that produced a blinding X45 solar class solar flare, right? That would knock out all of our crap. It really would. So there is a group of sunspots that are as big as that are turning in to face us right now. So we have geomagnetic and stuff already coming that's going to land with the full moon, and there's this huge sunspot that could send, or a series of sunspots that are coming to face this planet that could send off a solar flare that could really do some EMP-like damage. It's definitely a possibility. So when the Carrington event happened, all they had were telegrams, right? But it still set that shit on fire. So it's just, there's a lot of this energy coming to face us right now. And I'm not saying be fearful. I'm just saying be very aware that even without some sort of event that is going to destroy our whole civilization, there can be disruptions down to the electromagnetic level of, biology, of course, but even just airplanes and technology and communications and things like that. We don't know what's going to happen. But the fact that this full moon is this grand cross, and at least the solar weather that we know is already on its way, I do feel like that, wow, there's an infusion here of energy that could really assist us into maximizing the potential of this grand cross that's coming. So I wanted to share here, before we get into the astrology, my Gamma Bunta, our Gamma Bunta, it's not mine. And if you know, you know. I, for the life of me, could not. So this is our boss toad. He is draped in all of these beads that I got when I was actually studying in India. And he is usually out on the front porch railing facing out towards the yard. And so he's definitely our, he has a protective presence on many levels. So, but I did bring him in because I wanted to take this picture, and he's sitting, on the mantle above the fireplace here. And I wanted to make a video. I tried several times actually to make a really short video because it was really strongly coming through. This was about a week ago. I'd say a week, maybe a little bit more than a week ago, that I was getting a lot of strong vision and impressions just about, like, one that was really clear was a soldier who had his head bandaged or wrapped. I was getting lots of Lyran type of energy. I wanted to talk more about the Lyrans and the necessity for resiliency and adaptability, which is what the giant, this giant toad represents, spiritually and shamanically, that, to be resilient and adaptable. And we are coming into a mutable grand cross. So being adaptable is going to be one of our best assets along with resiliency. So how are you flexible and malleable while you're resilient and resolved? Well, I would say that Saturn, now moving direct in Pisces, is a really useful symbolic representation of that. How do you maintain resiliency while being adaptable and mutable? Well, Boss Toad is able to represent that, because the toad or the frog, the amphibian, they're adaptable because of their capacity to move and in some cases breathe underwater, but also to be able to breathe oxygen in the air, in the atmosphere. They're able to live, especially the toad, live in different environments, right? Live in the water, live out of the water. Start out as a tadpole and a swimmer, come onto land. So the resiliency is matched by this adaptability, this amphibian adaptability. And this was coming through really strong over the last week or so. And for those that are part of the Catalyst membership, we've been getting that imagery a lot in the readings of the Nine of Wands or the Moon in Sagittarius, or that image of the person that has gathered all of won the battles, right? But not without being battered and bruised, and it wasn't unscathed, I guess you could say. And so there is a need for resiliency, but also that the mutable adaptability, because things don't always go the way that you plan. Maybe circumstances have changed enough that you have to make different decisions, right? If you are too resilient and you're not adaptable, then you're just going to break, right? But if you are not resilient enough, then there's nothing to, and you're all mutable, then you're just moving with wherever the environment sends you, right? You have no resolve. And the thing about the Lyrans, and the reason that, there's probably lots of reasons why it was coming up, but specifically because the positions of the nodes of the moon, I would read as Lyran starseed markings, because they're not in Lyra right now, but they're in positions, they're in degrees that are in direct relationship to Lyra, but they're in mutable signs. And so the Lyran traits, as far as starseeds, are based on the fact that the Lyran race, from the constellation of Lyra, Vega being one of the main stars, you're talking about the root race of, the humanoid beings in the galaxy. If you're thinking about it either literally or mythologically, the idea here is that you're talking about millions and millions, if not longer, living in this galaxy, living in a physicality. And so the people that have Lyran traits or a Lyran signature at the soul level, because they have been Lyran, that's the whole point, that's the whole idea of being a starseed, is that the soul has the signature of this being, is there is a sense of fearlessness and leadership quality, certainly, but it's the fearlessness and it's the willingness to do what needs to be done in order to achieve something. There is an industriousness. There is a love of hard work from Lyrans, right? They just know what it takes in order to get things done because they have been living in 3D for, just so long. They've been everywhere and have scattered throughout our galaxy that the people who are Lyran starseeds, they understand this and they tend to, like I said, be very industrious. They tend to be, they don't shy away from hard work. In fact, they like using their physical bodies for things like, especially athletes, but also too, people that do physical labor. They tend to really enjoy being in physicality, but it's the resiliency, the willingness and ability to kind of stretch the boundaries of their comfortability in order to achieve something. So Lyran starseeds tend to be very independent. They tend to like to travel, but it's more about like, I'm going to go be an exchange student even though I don't speak any of the language, right? Or I'm going to sell everything I own and, sail around the world. Things that other people would just like not feel secure in doing. The Lyran starseed signature is just like, no, I'm definitely doing that. Like there's just no fear. But it's not reckless. The risks are very calculated and based in experience and maturity and confidence, right? And so that was coming in really strong over the last week. And again, I think that this is the type of transit coming up, this full moon that's a grand cross, is going to force us all into the box of being resilient but adaptable at the very same time in order to get through or to catalyze the friction of that energy. So there's our boss toad. I just thought he was in my opinion, he was a great representative of this full moon energy. So we're going to now look at the chart. So I'm going to stop sharing there. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to look at our full moon chart, and we're going to look at the main astrological themes for the next 2 weeks, because that's why you're here, right? So browse the birth chart. Now, before I get into that, just to like throw it in here right in the middle, and then we'll move on, is that just a couple of quick announcements. Number one, for those of you who are Catalyst membership, I am going to post your general energy reading next week. And for now, I'm going to start catching up. Well, not even catching up, but getting ahead of the game with the premium personal readings. And that is because on the 19th, which is the next new moon, which is going to be a big one. The fact that I'm going to be traveling is kind of a shame because I won't really be putting out any public content. However, so there will be no new moon forecast coming up after this on any of the public platforms. However, for those of you who are Catalyst membership, I am going to be putting together a solstice seasonal forecast. It's only going to be available for membership, Catalyst membership folks. If that's something you're interested in and seeing what else is involved, you can do that in the description box. There's a link there to the sign up page, and it tells you what all the different, tiers are and what you get with that benefit. But that solstice report or that seasonal forecast is going to be available only to the membership. And that's going to take the place of what otherwise would be offered and recorded and offered, I should say, over the Christmas holiday, because I'll be traveling. And I'm not really going to have the space or the bandwidth necessarily to do any readings or to even record content. However, I would really encourage you to at least see if you're interested in membership by signing up so you have access to this seasonal forecast, because the new moon is going to be conjunct the galactic center. There is the projected closest approach of 3i Atlas is supposed to be around that time as well. So who knows? And it's the solstice on the 20th, right? And so or whenever the sun comes into Capricorn. It's probably the 20th. So that's just getting a sense of what to expect as we move through December and January and then into February, when I'm going to do not only the Chinese New Year forecast, it's the very same window as the upcoming eclipse cycle, like down to the day, right? Between the new moon, which is on February 17th, into March, that is the eclipse cycle, which is also the next Chinese New Year, which is the fire horse. So I'm going to be putting a lot of energy into that forecast because I think that coming into 2026, and especially these two events, the Chinese New Year being concurrent with the upcoming eclipse cycle that is going to be starting to take us into the Aquarius Leo axis, is going to be the fire horse is something else. This is a very powerful, passionate year, creative, and also very grounded. So getting through the next couple of months and really like mastering the art of spiritual alchemy within ourselves is kind of essential. And this time period, this full moon, as difficult as it might seem, is going to be exactly the type of like test or experience that we probably want to be like, oh yeah, like look how freaking powerful we actually really are to bring love, front and center into this world, and how that reverberates out. So that's my message, my public announcement. And yeah, let's move on here. Get into the astrology. That's what we're here for. So this is December 4th. This is our full moon. The sun in Sagittarius, the moon in Gemini. You can see that the opposition is right here. Now, if this particular site showed the opposition with the nodes of the moon, then you get a much better view of what is the grand cross. But you can see it here. A grand cross is a grand square with two direct oppositions. So let's really break this down. The other things that I want to point out before we move on is, like I said, Mars, there's going to be a lot of Chiron stuff. So there's going to be a lot of like the wounds of self and self-worth and courage and assertiveness that is all part of the Chiron and Aries. And by the way, the natal Chiron, we're in a, Chiron return for the U.S. natal chart. Not to mention the fact, and I did mention it actually last time, is that the sun is basically sitting on the U.S. ascendant at this point. And I remember actually saying now, I'm not exactly sure, like exactly what I said, but just about the fact that the U.S. natal chart is very much wrapped up in this full moon because the sun is on the ascendant and the moon is on the descendant, right? And so that axis of who we are and who we are in the social contract, which is interesting to think about in terms of a nation, is going to be very much part of this. So I would venture to guess that a lot of this full moon, because of this grand cross, is going to be something that we're all experiencing together. And yes, it can very well be something that's your personal life, some sort of event or some sort of situation that is supremely frustrating, as well when it comes to who you are and how you feel on the inside and your soul's journey, right? But the thing is, those things aren't separated. What's happening out in the macro is going to be a reflection of what we're all experiencing within our own soul. So it just might not be as obvious to you on the inside as maybe the outside. And what's going on the inside for all of us has a direct impact all the time on what we experience outside of us. So you can see the grand square. Like I said, there's, Mars and Chiron are in a trine at this point as well. So that's, very in a fire trine, no less. So that's, there's a lot of potential burning off of old wounds that we can talk more about what that stands for. And also too, that Jupiter, let's see, there's going to be a lot of stuff with Jupiter as well. So, and Saturn is now direct, as well as Mercury. Mercury is now direct, but also still in Scorpio. As soon as Venus came into Sag, my gosh, what a lift. I told you she was going to be really challenging in Scorpio, and maybe it's just me. But as soon as she came into Sag, it was like, oh. it was just like, oh, there's hope. There's real hope. Because before then, it was like drowning in my own swamp. And I'm sure I cannot be the only person that was going through that. So, and a lot of people did get very sick with the solar weather before. So that's another reason why I bring it up, because it was so obvious with how strong the solar storms were, and, you know, the people getting sick, having infections, getting the flu, all kinds of stuff, pneumonia. I just want to caution people, because we're set to get more of the same type. And if that, you know, if we get a solar flare that's really, really strong, like, we don't know exactly what it's going to do, but we do know it's going to have an impact somehow. So let's start breaking this grand cross down. So the sun, 14 degrees Sagittarius, the Sabian symbol, the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, right? It's the power of spiritual ancestry. The Akashic Records, maybe, right? Didn't Edgar Cayce say that it was the Akashic Records, Hall of Records was under the Sphinx? You know, maybe literal, maybe it was more symbolic, but 14 degrees Sagittarius is also a really, really powerful place out in the cosmos. And that degree aligns with a magnetic, or gravitational, like, sinkhole called some sort of gravitational anomaly, right? The Great Attractor. That's what I'm trying to spit out. The Great Attractor, 14 degrees Sagittarius. So, you know, that's a pretty profound and strong place, okay? The Great Attractor. The idea here is that it's not properly explained, as far as I know, why there is this gravitational pull in this empty part of space, apparently, but it's there. So we can speculate on that all day, but this is where it's at, is 14 degrees Sag, roughly. And then we have the moon at 14 degrees Gemini, which is getting very close to the Orion constellation. I haven't pulled up the planetarium astronomy software, so I don't know exactly where the moon is in terms of constellations, so I'll probably look that up later just for my own benefit, but maybe you already know, especially you sidereal people. So 14 degrees Gemini, telepathy, essentially. So you have this contrast, or this opposition between a technique of sharing information between people, you know, that is riding a frequency, right, and is received as such, right, that it's not going through the normal channels of communication, at least with humans, right, where we have to speak to each other or write things down, right? It's a direct line. It's a technique. And then you have 14 degrees Sagittarius, which is an abstraction. Specifically, it's the abstraction of the ultimate telepathy, which is the transmission of the whole truth and nothing but the truth, right? The power of the spiritual ancestry to communicate or to pass information on to us, or for us to access it. And maybe the only way to do so is through this technique of telepathy, right? We have to get out from the normal channels of communicating. Maybe we need to access different means in which to share information in order to tap into that spiritual mastery. And I have a feeling, because the sun is in Sagittarius, right, that it's really going to highlight the technique within each of us, something that we will intuit, something that we will pick up on. Maybe we will not even intuit the technique itself, but maybe tapping into, especially if you have this in your chart, right? If you have 14 degrees Sag, anywhere from 13 to 15 degrees Sagittarius in your chart, I mean, this is going to really, I'd say anybody in the mutable signs, but if you're in that 10 to 15 degrees window of the mutable signs, you're definitely feeling a lot of this Grand Cross, full moon Grand Cross too. So pay attention to your own chart so you know if these aspects are coming up. This is, yeah, I can definitely feel it in my own life for sure. So big time. There's some pretty significant connections here for me. So I can't imagine I'm the only person. So 14 degrees Gemini, the telepathy, right? Now we get into the nodes of the moon, and then I'm going to talk about a grand cross. So the nodes of the moon in Pisces, Virgo. Well, these are in territory that I would, especially earlier before I moved into this degree, when it was at 14 to 15 or 15 to 16, it was in direct relationship to the star Vega, the south node in a trine, the north node in a sextile. And in starseed readings, I do read those degrees at these signs as Lyran markings. And so that when the nodes moved into these positions, that's when I was getting a lot of the visual and, I don't know, claircognizant kind of impressions about the Lyran energy being very, very present, and the need for that resiliency, and as well as the adaptability. And that's the thing, Pisces and Virgo are mutable signs. So they represent the mutability or the adaptability that really needs to be part of the Lyran framework in order to not become too rigid. Lyra is in the Capricorn. Lyra is its own constellation, but it's currently in the zodiac degrees of 10 to 21 degrees Capricorn. So Saturn is actually a really strong force within Lyran's starseed, and it's a very strong third chakra energy, which is very grounded, it's very physical, it's the root, right? So, but even a tree has to have has to have resiliency as well as adaptability and flexibility, right? Just like anything else. So that part, I feel like, these positions of Virgo and Pisces represent, the spiritual nature, the willingness to change, the willingness to grow and adapt in order to, as a result of this strong root system, right? Because it's always tethered to nature and to source as well, and that gives the ambitious kind of fearless person the capacity to learn from their mistakes, right? To actually analyze the situation and not be so afraid to make change as well, right? You can't be so rigid that you're afraid to make change, because you never actually accomplish anything that way. So, and if you're familiar at all with the mythology, or in some cases, depending on who you talk to, the actual historical timeline, the Lyran beings had to be adaptable in order to be resilient, because they were in a war and they had to split in order to survive. So that has been coming out really strong in general, and now it's just coming to a head with this particular full moon as part of this grand cross. So there's a constant pull between conflicting energies, obviously, just looking at it, right? And so you have all of these energies, the north node of the moon in Pisces, that's really having us, kind of be more tactful and kind of clever and cunning. Like when you are connected to everything else, in order to maintain your sovereignty, perhaps there is a need to kind of wrap yourself in some cleverness, some cunning. The Sabian symbol of 14 degrees of Pisces is a lady wrapped in a fox stole, right? A stole of fur. So that's the north node pulling us in that direction, right? The south node, 14 degrees of Virgo, is actually the family tree, an aristocratic family tree, the need for that root system. So you're already seeing the two sides of needing to be firm and resolved and adaptable with these two energies, the Virgo energy and then the Pisces. And this is kind of like the soul energy. And then, so then you have this push-pull, or these constant pull and conflicting of energies with even just the full moon. And it really is demanding adaptability and balance, right, in each of our lives. Like it is kind of a demand. Like we're not going to, succeed whatever we're doing without obliging, will abide by the demand, particularly around things like communication, information, like I just said, and change, obviously. I mean, that's the whole point of being mutable. Communication and information. And of course, that has a lot to do with the Gemini aspect and the mutability of everything having to do with change. While it's really challenging, obviously, it can also be a source of great strength and personal growth, right? I'm just reading my notes now. As the individual learns to filter, okay, this is important, filter information and adjust to new circumstances, right? I mean, it's very tempting, I think, to just take on all of this information. And this is something we've been working on for a while, right? Of filtering out the noise and the background noise, and really only focusing on that which we want to cultivate and to grow. And at the same time, so filtering out the information, but also knowing what information not to filter out, right? Because we have to adjust to new circumstances. And so perhaps there's information we should be listening to because things around us are changing, and maybe we need some new information, right? Maybe we have to be resilient and remember who we are and where we've come from, and that the root system is what stabilizes us. But at the same time, we have to be willing to, just like this says, right? Like adjust to new circumstances and be willing to listen to something new, right? And whew, it's interesting that this is happening after Thanksgiving. Very fascinating. So that's going to be the Grand Cross, a mutable Grand Cross. And at the same time, Mercury, so this is the beginning, not the beginning, but like at least in this next 2 weeks, I mean, the Chiron stuff is going to keep coming around and coming around. So the first one, Mercury is out of its retrograde, but still in Scorpio. So still very intense thoughts, investigations, research, that kind of thing into the underlying power of any relationship. Is in a quincunx or an inconjunct with Chiron, as you can see here. So that's going on also at the same time as this mutable Grand Cross. And again, so more tension, right? And what I see here is that we want to kind of like, well, number one, if any quincunx is going to force us to internally adjust, right? There are aspects that we cannot make, that we can't bring together or fit together no matter how much we try. And so the adjustment has to come from within. So we have to find a balance between this really strong need to maybe understand some things. Maybe we're feeling really like, no, I got to get to the bottom of this thing, or even communicate something. Maybe we're feeling a really strong need to communicate these hidden truths or deep-seated types of patterns, but also too, we have to find a balance between these intense needs to understand and communicate hidden truths and the things that it's interesting what's written here. Let's just say the quincunx forces adjustments. It's requiring you to find a balance between your intense need to understand and communicate hidden truths and your deep-seated, perhaps painful pattern of needing to be the first to act or speak up to prove your worth. And so I feel like that a lot of this is that we're kind of coming to terms with some things. We're starting to realize like, oh, okay, these are the patterns that trigger this kind of emotional cascade within me. And we need a new approach, right? The old way of how we've been dealing with our wounds hasn't been working, right? And I can attest to this personally, like just in terms of what I've been working through. So this really, I've had to do a very specific thing, which is find a new way to communicate truth, right? You may want to like throw it out there how you really feel or put it all on the line necessarily. maybe there's a way to communicate different aspects of what you're feeling. Maybe it's not so much the feeling itself, but like the deeper things that are responsible for how you're feeling. And maybe there's a way to be insightful and sensitive when you're communicating those things. It's potentially slower, more deliberate way of speaking. And maybe you heal by that Chiron teaching and healing of others, right? Everything you're learning, you may not be able to fully, like, I don't know, experience a metamorphosis because you're like just speaking your truth. Maybe you just have to come to terms with what that truth is for yourself and find different ways to channel that energy into other activities, into healing other people by teaching other people, and perhaps you're guiding other people through their own struggles with similar issues or self-assertion. And there's no quick fix to any of this. And I would say, again, between this quincunx or an inconjunct and a grand cross, which is really a box you can't get out of, there are no instant fixes. It's a long-term adjustment. And what will be clarified, I think, is with this full moon, right? It'll be like, oh, that's the technique, right? Is to be able to, be able to communicate heart to heart with everybody. And then, understanding is almost immediate at that point. And so when you feel your old wounds being triggered, maybe take a step back, breathe, and choose words carefully. And I couldn't agree more with that. And of course, this time of year is always very sensitive, very loaded. People, tend to start really struggling with things, disappointments or expectations not being met, or just feeling, there's just a lot of feelings that come up. And so I don't think we're going to, unfortunately, this year is not going to be any different, but there's going to be such a powerful, potent lesson in all of it to realign our perspective and our focus and recalibrate us towards, like, what is it that I do want to create, right? It's important to acknowledge how you feel. It's important to identify the ways that, you may have been like digging that karmic trench deeper and not even realizing it because you just like keep reinforcing an old thought pattern. So it's about breaking those patterns. And this is the type of transit that's really going to help with that as well. So more Mars energy as we start moving on, and Chiron is really what I meant to say, because Mars is going to trine Chiron. So it's difficult with Mercury, but Mars comes into the picture and has this trine with Chiron right after the full moon. And I feel like that this is a really powerful opportunity to heal, right? And so, of course, the full moon is going to illuminate the box that we've trapped ourselves in. Ooh, that's a good one. And the Mercury Chiron inconjunct is going to be like, well, we still have to find that stillness and that balance within ourselves first, and then we can kind of work on how we're going to get out of this box, or like what's our way through. And in the meantime, and that's what you work on throughout the entire rest of the lunar cycle, right? From full moon to balsamic moon. So in the meantime, we have more Chiron transits. So Mars in Sagittarius, in a trine to Chiron, is still retrograde, by the way. So a lot of this is internalized wounding that we're experiencing. So this is a really powerful opportunity to heal and overcome those past wounds related to identity, action, courage, conviction, all of those Aries themes. And again, this is going to be personal, but it's also going to be on the national stage. There's just too much of the U.S. natal chart in these transits. We're at a Chiron return. The sun and the full moon are going to be directly on the axis of, the rising sign and the descending sign of the U.S. natal chart. So this transit allows us to be very proactive, because Mars is in Sagittarius, and so it's just very lifted, it's very hopeful, it's very optimistic in terms of our personal action. The courage and conviction is what allows us to heal those old wounds of inner fulfillment, basically. So we get to be proactive to address these deep-seated issues, especially around personal power, and it turns vulnerabilities into strength by taking courageous, assertive action. So even though Chiron is retrograde, Mars is not. And so the action can be very specific and direct, even if it is addressing something that we are internally experiencing, right? And a lot of times this can be about healing physical issues. Transforming feelings of inaction to a strong sense of personal empowerment. So this is really great to have right after this full moon, like giving us this supercharge of energy. Right after that is Mercury in a trine to Jupiter, right? And so we have a very powerful period of very intuitive, emotional insight and subconscious processing. Even though Jupiter's retrograde, there's nothing wrong with that picture at all. And in fact, you can see that it's starting to create some strong connections too with Saturn. So Saturn, now moving direct, is going to have another trine with Mercury. So they'll both be direct. So that's really going to give some very down to earth, but also very insightful, very intuitive, emotionally stable kind of critical thinking skills with Mercury and Saturn. But before we get there, right? Mercury and Jupiter are, like I said, in a trine, intuitive emotional insights, subconscious processing, especially if we're able to see the underlying layers of the power dynamics in our relationships. They can really give us a sense of willfulness in terms of making change or integrating those truths, which will then allow us to kind of reassess, some of our goals, right? Into a more heartfelt place. I feel like that's a lot of what's going on right now. It's a time for strategic planning, but it's grounded in feeling. So, something that's long-term, something that's nurturing. So that's a really nice transit. And right after that is when Mercury is in a trine to Saturn. So again, there's that strategic, responsible, critical thinking skills. It's very intense. It's very investigative because of Scorpio. And Pisces is very empathic and spiritual, and Saturn is very much, very disciplined. So it really facilitates very deep and strategic thinking, making it really ideal for manifesting creative ideas and applying emotional intelligence to problem solving. So it's really, for as difficult of an illumination the Grand Cross may present itself as, right after is a lot of opportunity for healing and a lot of personal power, a lot of insight, a lot of subconscious processing, like I said, very disciplined, but emotionally intelligent problem solving. And in fact, the grand water trine of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury is something worth noting, right, just on its own, which is powerful, right? But just keep in mind that the Jupiter retrograde is going to make it slower, right? That, again, it's more about the inner nurturing and emotional insights. They might not be things that necessarily are going to come to fruition right now, but the time for emotional spiritual growth is meant to be long. It's about like reassessing those long-term goals, those deep-seated emotional patterns, right? There's no quick fix here, right? We're all talking about stuff that has been in place for this whole lifetime and possibly more. So these transits, while very impactful in terms of the insight we gather, are also meant to be long-term types of focuses and deep-seated emotional patterns. It's not something we're going to clear up in a weekend workshop. You know what I mean? You're not going to go to one energy work session and everything's going to be worked out. That's never how it is. But this type of grand water trine encourages a focus on bringing big dreams into reality, careful planning, making sacrifices, involving themes of emotional transformation, intuition, and healing. And so this is a great time to focus on those long-term goals, those big dreams, right? They don't just happen, like I said, in a weekend workshop. They will take, even years to fully grow and to mature. And so the retrograde periods mean a focus on reviewing, reevaluating, and that's Jupiter, right? Saturn and Mercury are now direct, and so our mind and even the structural foundation of some of these things spiritually, they may be much more externally applicable, if you want to think about it that way, right? Things are moving, things are outwardly stable with Saturn's direct, but Jupiter's still retrograde. And so the belief and the meaning on these things is what we are reviewing, reevaluating. And specifically, where's Cancer in your chart? Because it's going to show, that inner power, what area of life you're doing this reviewing and reevaluating, reworking past decisions. There's always potential for delays. Now, Jupiter will station direct in early March and will come out of its shadow, I think, May, June, if I remember correctly. So we still have we still have months to go before Jupiter is not only expanding into new territory, but then it's going to move into Leo. So the other part of this grand water trine is this kite that's building with Lilith and at the same time with Lilith opposite Uranus. And in fact, this is very much along the same lines as where the new moon was opposite Uranus. And so, of course, Black Moon Lilith being, that hole within ourselves that is primal. It's deep. It is almost animalistic, but it is still incredibly powerful. This opposition as the, intense, very inwardly focused upheaval around things like your authentic power. Suppressed desires is also a Lilith theme. Sudden shifts in value and security. That's Uranus and Taurus, right? This kite. And is the spine of it is this opposition. So you have this grand water trine as the base here, which I just talked about is, really emphasizing the reassessment of long-term goals, deep-seated emotional patterns, but it encourages you to focus on those big dreams, but also at the same time, knowing that it's very intense, it's very investigative, but it's also ideal for manifesting creative ideas. And then you have this kite, which is representing a moment of inwardly focused upheaval around your power, suppressed desires, and sudden shifts in values, right? It brings internal conflict, right? Because Lilith is an internal experience completely. So the opposition brings internal conflict that demands reevaluation of personal freedom and emotional security. So it's almost like it's inevitable that this comes up in order to reevaluate those long-term goals and those emotional patterns. In fact, it's like this type of transit, Lilith opposite Uranus, the spine of the kite is exactly the type of thing that's going to pull this stuff up to the surface that we're going to have to make peace with, right? And you'll never know what that is unless both sides of a situation are brought to the table. So internal conflict that demands reevaluation of personal freedom and emotional security. So sudden relationship shifts, also things like financial surprises, if we're going to talk about Scorpio and Taurus. I mean, that has a lot to do with currency, money, shared resources. So unexpected expenses or opportunities may arise, forcing a creative rethinking of your approach to money, but also a period of inner awakening, right? Sudden insights, moments of clarity. So this kite is, gives a place, purpose and direction. The opposition introduces the point of tension and focus. So the harmonious foundation of the trine provides the base, and then you have purpose, direction with the opposition, and then the kite pattern just in general is a source of creative and expansive energy. So again, here's more potential sitting right here. I mean, it really never ends. Like, I'm really curious to see how this is all going to unfold over the next week, because we have all this solar weather coming at the same time as this. So the 8th is going to be Mars square Saturn. This is usually a pretty difficult type of transit. Mars squaring into Saturn, 20, it's coming into alignment with the galactic center Mars is, right? In these last stages of Sagittarius. So there's a lot of frustration due to conflicting desires and a feeling of being held back when you have Mars square Saturn. And specifically, when you start coming into these last degrees of Sagittarius, especially 26 Sagittarius, a flag bearer in a battle, right? You are the banner man. You come into the battle carrying the banner, carrying the flag. Like there is a subservience to the collective ideals when you're at this degree and Mars is just charging ahead with no fear, right? With some serious conviction. But Saturn is just like, hey, not everybody needs to do it this way. And I think that's where the frustration is going to come because you're feeling held back because maybe you're trying to charge ahead into battle and perhaps that's not necessarily the right strategy. And so this type of transit requires a balance between taking action and practicing patience, strategic planning to navigate challenges like sacrifice or limitations or delays, right? You don't know that those delays or those limitations aren't part of redirecting you in another direction, right? Maybe it's not everybody has the same path, right? You or me, we don't even have the same path that we thought we did a year ago or a day ago. So this is a type of transit that kind of requires us to balance action and patience, especially with Mars and Sag. Like there's no patience. It's all action, and it's very action that is very based in it's very much based in a strong belief, right? I mean, that's the thing about Sagittarius. It's the spirit is behind you, and it's like it's like a crusade. It really is. All right, so the hits just keep on coming, guys. Like I think, oh, it's slowing down. Nope, it's not. So right after this, on the 10th, Neptune stations direct. Now we thought that it was foggy before. Neptune stations direct at the very last degree of Pisces, and then you start having more oppositions, right? Mercury and Uranus are in an opposition. Venus is going to be in a T-square with the nodes of the moon. So all this red on the chart as Neptune starts to move direct. So Mercury opposite Uranus, very sudden, unexpected insights, revelations. Again, we're at the same degree as the new moon. Mercury is 29 Scorpio, right? And so emotional and mental disruption. And then you have Neptune stationing direct, right? Where the fog rolls right back in. So Mercury opposite Uranus can create a clash between secrets and what is suddenly being revealed. Oh, boy. Wow. I could see some things happening that day as Neptune stations direct and the secrets being revealed, a clash between the secrets, and not even the secrets, but the the asking for forgiveness type of energy, right? Again, the mother pleading to the chief for the lives of her children type of thing, offering to take responsibility for the damage and destruction, then love is a principle of redemption. I mean, we can't forget that part of intercession as well. But the opposition to Uranus, which is like without the understanding of both sides of the situation, you can't really come to understand anything, right? And I just, challenging established beliefs about security, stability, especially in areas like finances or values. Wow, I could really see that as well. Those things being, maybe like a massive informational disclosure about certain things that have been kept secret is coinciding with a major turn of the markets, for instance, or a banking crash or something like that. I mean, I'm not saying it will happen. This is not a prediction. This is the type of energy. Now, it's a time for intellectual breakthroughs as well with Mercury opposite Uranus and problem solving, but may trigger oppositional defiance, power struggles, and especially with Neptune stationing direct when, as things start to become more cloudy, more foggy, more obfuscated in the realm of delusion, right? When stationing direct, I think that people aren't going to be quite sure what it is that they're defiant about, but they'll still come up. the power struggles. Developing emotional resilience, there's that word again, and self-regulation practices is crucial to navigate the potential lightning strikes of insight or disruption. So I would put a pin in the 10th for sure in terms of like, watch out for this day. And what day of the week is that? I think that's the middle of the week. Yeah, it's next Wednesday. So, and right after that on the 11th is the third quarter moon. And which is always a crisis moment as well. Another mutable square because the sun or the moon will be in Virgo, very close to the south node, where our mastery has been, right? Where we've also what we're leaving behind, which is a type of a personal discipline. And it's not to say that those things are that we give up on personal discipline. What it means is that that personal discipline is supposed to allow us to merge with all there is to become more, which is the Pisces energy, right? To be fully merged with source. But it starts with the individual root system of the plant, right? And is then putting its resources to support the growth of the fruit, because the fruit is what bears the seed of the next cycle. It's meant to be given. And so that's where we've been, right, as a soul, at the soul level, the Virgo energy. So that personal discipline, that practice, it's meant to be given or offered societally or collectively, right? Just like the fruit is not harbored by the plant, it is released to the world, as so is the seed. I feel like that is, we don't want to forget that we've put a lot of work into getting to this place and working together in harmony as well. And our ability, but at the same time, our ability to be, to analyze the situation, to really learn about, we may not be there yet, but, looking at things from a different person's perspective, looking through different lenses, I guess, so to speak, of where we can be. This third quarter moon, along with Mercury and Neptune being in a trine together, as much as that's going to bring about a lot of heightened introspection, emotional honesty, I think with the third quarter moon at the same time, it's not going to be nearly as, intuitive communication and express deep feelings with clarity and compassion. Those things are great. I just feel like with the third quarter moon in tow, yes, they can be profound heart-to-heart conversations and to transform creative ideas into reality. But I also think that the emotional honesty might be a little bit more than people are willing to or want to handle. I just kind of get a feeling about that for the 11th, this third quarter moon. Usually Mercury trine Neptune really, like I said, heightens that introspection and emotional honesty. And both of them are going to be direct when they're in a trine to each other. I just think the third quarter moon is going to throw a wrench in that whole thing, and the emotional honesty and the heart-to-heart conversations might be very difficult. So the 13th, again, more difficult Uranus transits. Mars is going to quincunx Uranus, though there's more of periods of unpredictable erratic energy that forces an adjustment. Now, Mercury will sextile Pluto. Oh boy, it just is endless, guys. There's so much happening. Okay, let me just kind of pull out the main theme here. Mars is going to square Neptune, so just, talk about confusion and uncertainty. That's on the 14th. So let's keep moving ahead here. So it's like the full moon happens and the days following it, there's so much healing energy and potential to make the most of it. And then we get to about the third quarter moon or even right before it, and things again, it's right as Neptune stations to move direct, things start getting more difficult again. And it's just like, okay, here's it's kind of like looking at the Schumann resonance, the frequency. It's up and down and up and down. I feel like we're going to see a lot of that, but like weekly. So the first week after the full moon roughly is going to be challenging, but there's going to be a lot of supportive healing potential going along. And then we kind of get to this point, right? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, and we start hitting more of the actual conflict that we are still tasked with putting the, we're still tasked with objectively and intentionally putting forward everything that had been illuminated with the full moon, right? It's when you get here, the disseminating and the third quarter moon especially is really where the rubber meets the road, right? Because in the first half of the lunar cycle, from new moon to full moon, you're reacting to the challenges that are unanticipated, that are hidden, that kind of pop up, and you're like, oh, this is what it feels like. You get to the full moon and you have your revelation about things, and then as the moon light wanes, you have to still take those revelations and consciously respond to the challenges. In some cases, especially with maybe the disseminating moon, you have to still put forward what you've learned, even if those that you are attempting to communicate with don't want to listen. And that's another part of this whole, you might need to filter out noise and know what type of communication you are willing to engage in, because you might find yourself like just, hitting a brick wall in some cases, or not getting through to people, or people are not getting through to you. So, you can lead the horse to water type of thing. So that's more of the disseminating moon. And people born at that time, they tend to really fall into that role. Like they tend to want to really share a lot of what they've learned at a soul level, and be able to teach maybe, or to preach, you know what I mean? Either or, but then they, it's not always received and that can be really frustrating. So anyway, I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent here, but the point I'm trying to make is that at this point, next week, it's going to be, and Mercury moves into Sagittarius, which things move swiftly, but it's not where Mercury wants to be. Mercury wants to be in Gemini. In fact, Mercury is going to be at its detriment when ideas need to be synthesized into understanding and meaning. And Mercury is like, no, I just want to play with ideas, right? So, but that's part of the adaptability of all of these mutable signs as well. And Mercury rules two mutable signs, Gemini and Virgo. So there's something to be said for the malleability of, our own thoughts, right? Not to say that they are malleable and they can be shaped and molded by outside forces, which we know is happening through all kinds of methods. But it also helps us to know, like, you know what? That's just not what I'm going to think about that anymore, and see how things change, right? When you put a whole new neural pathway into action about a specific event or relationship in your life, and see how you feel about it changes, right? Gemini does come before Cancer, if you need a visual here to understand what came first, the chicken or the egg. The mind, and then the feels. The emotional feels, I should say. So, or the nervous system, let's put it that way. That's probably actually true. I bet the nervous system probably develops way before your endocrine glands, but I don't know that for sure. Anyway, another tangent. So by the time we get to the 14th, right, we're going to keep seeing more red is my guess. So next weekend, there are a couple things that are more stable and harmonious, the blue lines. But by the time we get to the 14th, we're going to get Mars and Neptune in a square. So it's already squared Saturn, as we talked about. And so when it squares Neptune, there's confusion and uncertainty. Our energy levels are fluctuating. Now, Mars is definitely at the galactic center at this point. We really just want to tap into that galactic knowing and take personal action from that place. And so there's a tension between that assertiveness and the confusion, right? Especially because Neptune is at the last degree of Pisces. It just stationed direct. So there's conflict, there's lethargy, spiritual searching, right? I have a feeling that people are really going to start questioning I'm acting on these belief systems in this sense of what my responsibility is here to maintain and perpetuate civilization, but I'm really confused about what this all really actually means. So this can manifest as unclear goals, a feeling of being energetically drained, a clash between your desire for action, which is Mars, and a need to escape or find deeper meaning. Sometimes you kind of have to escape for a little while in order for your to access what is actually meaningful to you. This specific aspect is most potent around this time of 2025 as Mars moves to 29 Sag and Neptune is at 29 Pisces, right? They're going to move into new signs in early 2026. So this is a very potent, point of this type of square. So confusion and uncertainty, fluctuating energy, misdirected action, right? Your efforts might be scattered or misdirected. Misdirection. Wow, that's a strategy. So that's something to consider as well. So there's spiritual urges and escapist urges. Sometimes they are the same thing and we don't know the difference. But it is a time of heightened spiritual awareness. And yes, a strong desire to escape reality through various means, but you can also be totally present here and still experience that heightened spiritual awareness. It's very easy to want to engage in all kinds of escapism, and this can be very... people can really be acting out through a fantasy and be completely deluded. So, this can span the spectrum of like harmless to very harmful, in my opinion. So conflict between action and idealism as well. The good news about this is that the sun has a favorable and balanced relationship with Chiron at the same time, right? That's a very powerful opportunity when the sun is in a trine to Chiron. And I want to point out mythologically that it was Apollo, the sun god, who raised and was responsible for Chiron, Chiron the wounded healer, right? Chiron, who was all humanoid, but also a centaur, and was immortal and was a gifted teacher and healer. He was brought up by Apollo because he was, rejected by both of his birth parents. So when the sun and Chiron are in such a favorable aspect, it's usually really very powerful and it's very healing, right? And it's to find healing and strength by embracing a sense of purpose and self-worth. We know that we're moving into new territory, and perhaps this is about being able to embrace that and to consciously move into the requirements of that new territory, right? So the ascension energies or new earth, whatever, you know what I mean? The awakening. But that means that we have to, accept the mission, and accept that we want to put love as the center point of all of this. And that requires that we do healing with ourselves. Now, embracing a sense of purpose and self-worth through your unique beliefs and identity, right? So this is all the Chiron and Aries thing, especially in areas where you have felt a struggle to be seen or assertive. It suggests that your journey to authenticity and self-assurance can become a source of power and clarity, allowing you to move forward with a renewed sense of vitality. So a really simple way to think about it is just turn your pain into power. Now, granted, the sun at the same time is going to be in an inconjunct with Jupiter. And again, there's that internal conflict between your personal beliefs and your emotional needs. But again, there's the reevaluation part. Now, like I said, it just is endless. It's endless. All right. So Mars is going to come into Capricorn, which it absolutely loves. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So talk about getting shit done. And not even getting shit done, but it's more of like getting motivated to keep doing stuff because there's going to be something very substantial that has been solidified, crystallized, right? That's what Capricorn, it is the root system of the whole forest. Mars coming into Capricorn is the 3 of discs, right? So it's not the beginning of something. It's something that has been established and a foundation that has been created that you're like, whoa, that happened. And it's a completely motivating force for Mars. It's like, let's keep building. So I love this for all of us, Mars coming into Capricorn. And, I wish this wasn't such a long, I really do. I wish that I could find a way to make this more concise. It's just not the way that I read. Mars comes into Capricorn, and then the sun is going to square Saturn. Saturn being the ruling sign of Capricorn. So the sun, everything else that has come through Sag has squared Saturn here. So the sun is going to be no different, obviously, in terms of making us feel a little bit of frustration. There's a tension between reality, which is Saturn, in the most unreality sign that there is, which is Pisces. Tension between optimism and reality, which is Sagittarius is the optimism, or between faith and doubt, and making it challenging but potentially clarifying period for navigating responsibilities versus dreams, particularly those related to creativity and spirituality. So Mars being in Saturn's sign and being exalted there is just I feel like there'll be some measure of oh, look at this foundation that exists. Let's keep building on this. And this type of square with the sun in late Sagittarius, it's not like you throw everything out the window that you have been, identified with, where your optimism has been, but again, potentially clarifying period for navigating responsibilities versus dreams, right? And so we have our dreams. We have the things that we want to bring into reality, that we want to interact with as reality, that are different than what is happening now. And there's nothing, it's like being able to anticipate where things are going to be and be able to act on that, and to be able to model that in some way, but also be very much grounded in what's happening right now. And I think that will give that sense of action that Mars in Capricorn is going to be kind of driving, a place to go. And as we come into the balsamic moon, we have another really healing aspect, which is here. So we'll do this, and then I promise we'll be done. And the thing is, this is going to be the last content that's available publicly for probably well over a month. So I guess I don't mind that it's going to be a little extra longer than it normally is. I personally like long form content because I like to listen to things when I engage in a, some sort of project that I'm especially working, like physical work, right? If I'm working on the property, doing landscaping, stacking firewood, that kind of stuff, chores. I like long form content. My brain, that's why I do it, because I like it being thorough. I like a lot of information. I like it to be well-rounded. So as we come into the end of this lunar cycle, the end of this transmission as well, we're going to see that, well, number one, Jupiter and Chiron are coming back into a square with each other. That's actually going to be happening technically in the next lunar cycle, like after the new moon on the 19th. However, as you can see here, Venus is definitely in a trine with Chiron. So if you thought that the sun was really healing in its trine to Chiron, Venus in a trine to Chiron is a very, especially in Sagittarius, very expansive, very freedom-loving energy to heal these past wounds related to self-assertion and identity, the Chiron wound in Aries. So for those of you also who have been going through your Chiron return because you have natal Chiron in Aries, this is also something you're personally going through. It's an opportunity to find love and pleasure through new experiences. That's what Venus is all about. And to integrate the bravery of Chiron and Aries into personal values and relationships, potentially by seeking partners who foster growth and optimism. So not only is the sun trine Chiron very healing, we're clarifying, a sense of purpose. And then you have Venus that's just going to be Venus is like a balm or a salve on everything. And, but through self-assertion, through a freedom, and through optimism in relationships, right? And seeking those people or those partners or those relationships that do foster growth and optimism. So that's going to take us to the end of this lunar cycle, the balsamic moon, and then on the 19th, which is a Friday, we're going to have the new moon conjunct the galactic center. And let's see what else is what's going on that day. Okay. Because I feel like there was one other transit that was really, no, I guess not, really important. I mean, these two are going to come into a exact square. So as far as I'm concerned, it's already happening. And this has already happened before because they both weren't retrograde. So they've squared at least one other time before, if not more. So there's a lot of healing. There's a lot of healing that is still happening with all of these transits related to Chiron. And there will continue to be. But this new moon conjunct the galactic center with pretty much conjunct Venus is also very healing. And this is very close to a trine. I mean, it's wide, but it's still within 6 degrees. This new moon is within 6 degrees of Chiron in Aries. And so I feel like a lot of this energy is very healing. Now, it also is in conjunct with Uranus. So again, there's that internal adjustment that we can do the things we know we need to do, in alignment with our belief systems, the meaning, the understanding, like keep working with that. But Uranus will continue to be the monkey wrench in terms of shifts in value, in security, in physical materials, if we're going to talk about Uranus and Taurus. And of course it's in connection with the Pleiades. So like I said, Uranus being here, is not, I just feel like the Pleiadian starseeds, and, don't take it too personally. It's just that that aspect of us tends not to, just like any Taurus person, tends not to deal with change very easily, because it affects Pleiadian starseeds so directly, and so intensely that we just have to we end up feeling all of the shifts, and sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming. So Uranus has been certainly an exercise in how to tap into that Heyoka energy for all of us. So, all right, my voice is kind of shot, so I am going to leave it here for this transmission. This, what is it? A full moon in Gemini. So thank you all for being here, for sticking it out for the full transmission. I really appreciate it. Thank you for subscribing to this channel. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for commenting and sharing. It all does actually matter to the growth of this channel. Also, I've made a whole 6 cents in revenue on BitChute. It was the first video platform that's offered me anything in terms of monetization. That's very interesting. So hooray for that, my whole 6 cents on BitChute. I just thought I'd share that little milestone. I have never made any money on any of these video platforms. So speaking of money, if you do feel called to donate to these free new and full moon forecasts, maybe membership is not something that you're in a position to do right this second to make that commitment, but you do feel like you want to donate, there are ways to do that in the description box below through PayPal and Venmo. So that would be awesome if you feel like gifting me something for the holidays. If not, no big deal. I know we're all everything is really still very tight in some ways. I've been thinking this for a long time, but I've been seeing a lot more memes around this theme about how people, they're talking about, the bank crashing and things like that. And like, the whole reset of the financial system as a whole and how devastating it is. And the memes of like, oh, people living to paycheck to paycheck, barely even noticing, oh, that happened. You know what I mean? Like the bank's failing. Okay, I don't have anything in there. So, it's kind of, I've always thought that. I always said to my husband, I was like, it'll barely go by. I feel like it'll be a blip in just the way that we live our lifestyle. It'll be hardly noticeable. We're like, oh, well, we never have any money anyway. And I don't even want any lectures from any of you about manifestation and abundance. So that's my 2 cents about that, because I'm just joking around here. Anyway, and there's something to be said for living very simply and being fulfilled with things that are not material. But, I don't have any Taurus in my chart, so what do I? It's all Sag, Scorpio. Those things have nothing to do with anything physical. So, my friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for everything that you do. Hope you had a wonderful, nourishing, Thanksgiving, and that it really did instill a sense of thankfulness and gratitude with whatever you were doing, because I really think that's going to be the key here, moving through the end of 2025 and into 2026. If you are interested in membership or even just seeing what I have to offer in terms of readings and energy work, website is linked in the description box below. Looks like it stopped snowing through the course of doing this recording, so snow day still continues though. Woohoo! Day off school. All right, everyone. Take care of yourselves. I won't see you until after Christmas and the New Year, so enjoy your holidays, whatever they happen to be. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other the best you can. I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.